thank you so much for stopping by today. I'm really looking forward to this. Let's start from where you are right now. So you're the president of M&K Media. So tell us what M&K Media is and what your role there is as the president.
Certainly. Thanks for having me, Victor. Really appreciate it. So, yeah, I'm the president at M&K Media. We're a medium-sized boutique agency in Toronto, independently owned, 100% women-owned. We've been around since 2001. So actually this year we're celebrating our 25th anniversary, which is a huge deal in the media agency landscape. And we're super excited to celebrate that with our colleagues in the industry. So on a day-to-day basis, I run the agency. So I'm in charge of pretty much everything and from staffing, operations, business development, finance, and also managing relationships with our clients, like top-to-top relationships, and all of that. So it's a great role, and I really love it.
We're going to jump more into that later on, but let's go back to the beginning first. You're from London, Ontario. I had no idea.
Yeah.
So what was life like growing up in London, or as I think you like to call it, North London?
Yes. So I'm from London, Ontario, the Forest City, 2 hours south of Toronto. So it was a great place to grow up. I had a great school experience. My public school was just around the corner. In fact, we backed onto the public school, my house. My brother and I were growing up. Went to a great high school, Lucas, which was awesome. It's a great city to grow up. I think it's very different from Toronto, and I think I moved to Toronto because I wanted more of that urban feel. London's more spread out. It's more of like a driving city, as an example. But they do have a really vibrant art scene, particularly now in the past few years. I've been going back a lot more with my family to visit my family, and it's a really fun city. There's lots to do, and my parents both worked at the University of Western Ontario my entire life, so that is a big part of London, Ontario. Western and Fanshawe College. It's a university college town. So I grew up, on campus and really experiencing that. So it was really fun.
Here's something that you and I have in common. I didn't know this about you, and I don't think you know it about me. I don't talk much about it, but I had no idea that you were a musician, and
Mhm.
piano and flute played a big part of your life. So I imagine you probably got into piano first because that's kind of like the gateway instrument. So what age were you introduced to piano?
Yes, so piano was a huge part of my life. I started when I want to say 5 or 6. I actually started studying the Suzuki method, which back then was it was a very, very tough learning curve. So as a child, I started that, and then I moved into the Western Conservatory of Music. So I played the piano from about age 5 to university. So the story is actually quite interesting. Piano became like a bit of an obsession for me. It was kind of a pastime at first, and then I, decided that I was interested in performance piano. So I actually trained and applied to Western for performance in piano, and I was accepted. But unfortunately, and this is going to sound really lame, but it is very true. I had a musical injury. So because of my time spent practicing, I practiced like 3 or 4 hours a day at one point. I had tennis elbow so bad that I couldn't even lift my arms. And it was
Really? Okay, I've
yeah,
never heard of that. Like, I've heard of people getting carpal tunnel syndrome
yeah,
from piano, like in the wrist, but you got tennis elbow from playing
and
piano
carpal tunnel. So it was
and
both.
carpal tunnel. So you had like
Yeah.
double trouble.
So it was quite heartbreaking because I had to give it up. Like I literally came to a point, I said, I can't do this professionally. And I also played flute. So I played flute in high school and I was in the band, and I performed as well. So it became one of those decisions where I was either going to go forge ahead into performance music, or take a different path, which I ended up taking a different path.
Did you have a favorite composer that you enjoyed playing?
I mm, no, I'd say no. I wasn't really into classical
Oh, really? So because you'd
performance. Yeah,
mentioned Western Conservatory. So my next question was going to be, did you go through the different grades with the Royal Conservatory? Because I had to do that as well too. And
no.
those
Yeah, I was more
exams gave
Western.
me anxiety. Like,
A lot of, you know what I really enjoyed, which is, looking back at it now, I think it kind of helped me train for media in a weird way, was music theory.
Mm,
So I
yes.
love the aspect of music theory and learning about relationships with sound um, and it kind of is like a bit of data in there, music theory. So um, that I really really like, and it's hard. It's very very difficult.
And so you played the flute though. Do you think that might have accelerated your injuries as well? Because like I
Mhm.
played in the band as well too. I was playing bass at that point, but like you're just so cramped with the flute right there. And was it also difficult for you going from the piano, which is kind of like it's the ultimate instrument. It's kind of kind of the center of music, and then going to the flute, which is more of a supporting flute. And anyone who plays the flute's going to hate hearing this, but it's more of a supporting instrument in the band, even though it is more of a lead instrument within the band, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I think that looking back, all of the fine motor movements of your hands, you kind of take for granted. So when you're playing an instrument at that type of a level and that amount of time, you're working these tiny muscles in your hands that you wouldn't normally work. And I think that the combination of piano and flute, I also have a like side note, I have a small wingspan in terms of my reach of my hands. So a lot of pressure was put on to, you know, spread out and use those muscles. So I think the combination of the two was not good for me. But in terms of the band element of flute, I loved being part of a band. I think it was such a valuable learning experience, how to work with people, how to play off people, understand your cues. And flute is a great instrument for, may not always have a solo, but certainly it stands out in the band a lot of the time. So I loved it.
Did you ever delve into the piccolo? The flute's like
No,
little sister?
I
No.
did not. I don't think I did. I might have, tried played around with it once in a while, but I still have my flute, which I try to play sometimes.
Did you dabble in jazz piano by any chance?
No, I was classical. I wasn't. I'm not a like a riffer. I'm more of a classically trained musician.
It's got to be very rigid. And you also did competitions as well. Like,
Yeah.
take us through what a piano or a music competition is like.
It's intense. So I did Qantas.
Mm.
So if you're familiar with Qantas, so I did that every year. So I have a bunch of medals actually somewhere behind me in this room of Qantas wins or placements or whatever. So it's it's intense. I say it really helped set me up for presenting and like being in front of crowds. Except it's like you're under a really fine microscope of any mistake you make. Like judges are sitting there waiting for you to make a mistake, and you're graded based on musicality, technical aspect of how you perform, your presence, things like that. So you're just being judged. It's so difficult. Um, but I'm glad I went through it. It really put me through kind of the ringer to understand, you're not going to win all the time. You're going to mess up. And that happened. I remember stage fright happening and just freezing, as a child. And you have to work through it and kind of pick yourself up and do it again the next time. So
How'd you get past that? And before performance, did you have any sort of like pre-performance ritual that you would do?
that's an interesting question. I always tried to take time for myself. I didn't like feeling rushed. And I still actually to this day, it's like one of my things at work and in my day-to-day life. I'm always early, or I try to be, because I like to have at least 10 minutes of just time. It doesn't have to be anything you do in particular, just kind of standing there or having a drink of water. So that's something that I would do. And my parents were always like, let's not feel rushed. Like, let's get there early, have a chat with your teacher and, you know, just feel comfortable in the space before you go perform. So that was a big thing for me.
Speaking of your parents, why do you cite them and other members of your family as your biggest influences?
Well, my parents are always are still super supportive of everything that I do. If you think about the amount of time they spent carting me around to music lessons and
Mm.
performance, it's kind of like a sports. Like if you're really into sports, it was a very similar type time commitment. Yeah, my parents have always been supportive of me and continue to be. So, and my family, we're super tight. My brother lives in Halifax, so although he's far away, he's super supportive of me as well. So yeah, just they're the best. I love them.
I love that your first job was at Pizza Hut because every once in a while we get someone who was working QSR. And I want to ask you, was it like the classic Pizza Hut that you and I probably grew up with, or was it one of those like just takeout Pizza Huts? Was it a proper restaurant
Oh, it was a classic Pizza Hut. So
with the
this
buffet and the
story,
dessert bar and everything?
$4.99 lunch buffet, all you can eat. Um, no, the Pizza Hut was an awesome experience because I worked there from when I was, I'd say 14, late, like almost 15, before you're supposed to work, but this is a long time ago, um, till the end of university. So it was like a very long span. And what happened over the years is the whole neighborhood, including my family and my brother as well, worked at the same Pizza Hut.
Nice.
So all of our friends and friends I still have to this day, we talk about Pizza Hut working together, Friday, Saturday night, and just hilarious. Like so many stories that, basically half our high school worked in the same Pizza Hut.
Is that Pizza Hut still there, and is it still a classic Pizza Hut?
It actually recently, in the last, I'd say 5 years, it is no longer there, but it was there for a long time. This at near Masonville Mall. And now it is a bank, unfortunately, but it was there for a long time.
I used to love those Pizza Hut buffets. But you tell me if this happened at your Pizza Hut, where they
Mhm.
would bring out like two types of pizza, Hawaiian and pepperoni. No one would go for the Hawaiian, everyone would go for the pepperoni, and it'd be like vultures waiting for the next pepperoni pizza to come out. Like I know this sounds like a first world problem, all you can eat pizza, but it was just funny that like people were clearly voting with their appetite right there. And it's like Pizza Hut wasn't taking a hint, just throw it another pepperoni pizza.
That's exactly what it was like. The real like coveted pizza was the dessert pizza.
Oh
So
yes.
if you
Yes.
remember that,
I do
and it
remember
was
that.
people would be waiting, like standing at the buffet, waiting for it to come out.
It was literally a giant cookie with what, ice cream and cake frosting on it?
Yep. And then there was the soft serve ice cream right beside it. You could add that.
That's true.
Hmm.
What did you learn about yourself working in QSR? Like that's a high pressure situation.
Hmm. Yeah, I truly believe that young folks should go through that experience of being a server, front of house, back of house, dealing with customers. I learned so much about customer service, um, responsibility. So even I used to open was when I was in university. I opened the restaurant in the morning, which means like you get everything ready for the day. Get open the doors, things like that. That responsibility of showing up on time, ensuring that everything is done, um, cash management,
Mhm.
learning about all of that, even just like using the systems, understanding the POS systems. But I think the biggest thing is customer service and working with people, because there was a lot of not great experiences with working with customers, right? You got to go through all that. You messed up. You didn't put the order in right. You have to go over and apologize, give them a discount. The kitchen's backed up. You got tap dance, figure out how to, make everybody happy. So I think that it's a very valuable experience.
You mentioned you studied at Western University, but let's go back to your acceptance there because you studied media information technoculture and ultimately that's what you graduated in. But you also mentioned that you were accepted for music performance there as well too. So you apply to two programs at once or okay, so simultaneously you had a backup then as well. Okay.
Yes, because
How
I
far,
wasn't 100% sure I was going to do performance.
what
Hmm.
would like, let's say for example your injuries weren't as bad as they were and you were able to get past them and you'd gone in for music performance. What was the plan? Like what did that life look like or that alternate reality look like for Jill McDonald?
Honestly, Victor, I had no idea. Uh,
That was
I
it. It was
just,
just like I like doing this, so might as well do it
yeah,
in
I
university.
felt like it was something that I was good at and passionate about, and I was just going to figure it out. So I don't really have a good answer.
So then why was media information technoculture your alternative then to that?
So at the time, so the MIT course at Western University is now, so this was 20 years ago, 20 whatever years ago. Now is a high demand course. At the time when I applied, this was the second graduating class that would go through the program. So it was very, very new. And it was one of the first courses that I remember when I started researching universities and colleges at the time that included that culture aspect to marketing and media and advertising. So this was a blend of everything: media, information, and technoculture. And the behavioral cultural piece of the program was something that really appealed to me, like understanding humans and behavior. It's kind of like behavioral science, but from a media and advertising marketing perspective. Um, it was a real, everyone was buzzing about this course at the time, or this program. So that's why I applied. I was just super interested in um, starting to learn about that. And it was a great program.
So your first year was the second year of this program.
Mhm.
So what did they talk to you about when it came to career prospects? Because usually what every university does is they sit the alumni down specifically for that program. But in your instance there, you didn't have the benefit of the alumni. Like literally you were going to be one of the first graduates of this program telling people what they could do in the future. So what did you have an eye on at that point?
At that point, it was pretty broad. I thought of it more as like a foundational experience to learn how to learn in an academic environment in a topic that I was really interested in. So I didn't necessarily have a career path in my mind taking that undergrad, like Bachelor of Arts program. I always thought after a BA I would do a college certificate or diploma, which I ended up doing um, on the practical side of things. So I'd say that MIT was more, me understanding how to learn and kind of being that academic environment, which I loved. Like the people I met in that course are still my best friends to this day. And a lot of them actually, interesting enough, are in marketing and advertising industry, and I see them around. So I think that a lot of the the students that graduated from that course at the early stages transitioned into very interesting marketing and advertising roles down the road.
I like asking people who studied media and marketing this question. So is there anything from that program that is no longer applicable nowadays? Like, I'll give you an example. So when I was studying, MySpace was the rage. Doesn't
Mm.
exist anymore. And there this little company called Facebook was kind of coming around the corner, and it was just like, oh, hey, we're big with the university and college students. Is there anything from when you were studying MIT that it was applicable? Maybe people were like, you've got to focus on this. And now that you look back on your career, you're like, yeah, that phased out pretty quickly.
Honestly, Victor, if I can be honest with you, no, because this is before Facebook. This was like more, it's critical theory. This was theories of communication and public opinion, polling, um, perception of truth, communications, like more foundational. So I'd say that your question doesn't really start to frame up for me until like at a college level.
Mm.
When I went to Humber and I took a postgraduate certificate in journalism. So to that on that side, I worked at a variety of different places, but there were certainly publications or companies that people had co-ops at that don't exist anymore, on the traditional side and the digital side. So,
So when did you get that itch in university to pivot into journalism and study at Humber?
well, so when I was at Western, one of my good friends, still to this day, he was the editor of the Western Gazette. So I wasn't in journalism at the time, but I hung around a lot of journalism peeps. And they're just great. It's such a fun vibe. We had so much fun. So journalism was always kind of in the back of my mind as a potential option for me. And then when I graduated MIT with a BA, I decided to um, apply for journalism. And that's the direction that I went, which at the time I was so excited about being a journalist and getting into that profession.
Take us through the differences between doing your BA and then the way the course load was structured or the curriculum was structured at Humber.
I think a BA, as I said, is more of like a foundational understanding how to learn. So there was film, there was art. Like I took like art courses, I took technology, computer science courses, I took um, what else? Tons of different, like it was kind of a swath of across media, information, tech, very wide base. And then at Humber, it was definitely more specialized. So it was a postgraduate certificate specifically to graduate with a print, or I think it was print or broadcast degree or certificate to get a job. And that was the whole purpose. And at the end of the Humber program, there's a co-op placement that needs to be completed, one each semester at the time. So I did 2 different co-ops, like in real time co-ops in the field that were very valuable for me. So it was like more theory, groundwork for university, and then more practical on the ground type work with the college program.
Would you say those internships were your first foray into media, like your first professional foray?
Yes, 100%. So I did 2 internships, one at Rogers, which I actually was a camera person, which
Oh,
was
nice.
awesome. I
Was it
loved
like
it.
cable 10 or was it
Yes.
like,
Yeah.
okay, so it wasn't the mothership, it was the local cable 10.
And yeah,
Nice.
and it was great experience. More just, I wasn't very good at camera work, to be honest with you, but it was more like working in a team, that environment of being on set and understanding the high pressure situation. That is a high pressure situation. If you screw up,
Yes.
everyone knows. So that was my first one. And my second one was at Canadian Living Magazine, which was amazing. I was an editorial intern, and I worked in a group with women leaders, and they really helped me kind of gain my confidence in that space. A lot of my time spent fact checking. So that was a valuable lesson for me. It was sitting down, fact checking copy and articles before they go to press, and ensuring whatever was on paper was fact checked against at least 2 or 3 different critical sources. And that was all done manually. Keep that in mind, right? Like looking at textbooks and things like that. And then they actually allowed me to write 2 different pieces that were published. So that was just like my dream. In Canadian Living Magazine, which I still have behind me somewhere, I had a double-page spread article.
Okay, so after those internships and you graduated from Humber, why pivot into the agency world and get into media planning and buying a cassette?
Well, it's one of those stories. I think everyone's like, did you take media in school? And the answer is sometimes no. And how'd you get into media? What my best friend worked at Cassette, and she said, there's all these roles open for media planning assistants. You should apply. And I did. And it was one of the best decisions that I ever made, hands down, for sure. So that's how I entered it. I had a lot of transferable skills from journalism that were applicable. I just wasn't necessarily trained in media planning or buying coming out of school.
So things like GRPs, CPMs, all those little details that you were learning on the job then.
100%. Yeah, I learned that all on the job. Which looking back, I wish I'd done a little course before I entered the industry, just to have those foundational media math type skills. But I certainly did learn on the job.
You spent 5 years at Cassette. So give us an idea of some of the clients that were keeping you busy.
Oh, I worked on a variety of clients. Bell Canada was the biggest one at the time. BMO, Bank of Montreal. Those were the 2 big ones that I worked on over the course of the I guess it was 4 or 5 years that I was there.
Well, and this was back when they were at King West, right?
Yep.
Yeah, that beautiful office. But everything's moving to Liberty Village now. And so
that office was the best.
That was a great office. Never worked there, but I had the chance to entertain there a couple of times. So after 5 years at Cassette, what enticed you to go to Boss?
So Boss Advertising at the time was it was an independent agency, I believe, located out of Montreal. So this was before Dentsu Boss, all that. So it was a small kind of offshoot of Boss Montreal, Quebec, based in Toronto. And the media team was about 4 people at the time. So the thing that I loved about it was building something. I think that's where kind of my entrepreneurial spirit started to kick in at a young age. And, I wanted to try something new. And I think that happens to a lot of junior planners and buyers in the industry. So that's really propelled me to give that role a try.
So when you made the jump to boss, was there a bit of culture shock given that you had spent 5 years at cassette? Because 5 years is a long time for anyone in the media world to spend in one job or at least with one company.
Yeah, certainly there was a culture shock. I think it went from, that huge culture of cassette, which is their culture is amazing still to this day. And at the time, when I was there, that's where I met all my friends, right? Like your first job, you make all these connections, and they're people that I still hang out with to this day. We call it like the cassette crew. They know who they are. But yeah, going to Boss where it was smaller, it was more entrepreneurial. It was also interesting because it was like on College Street. So totally different vibe. King West to college,
Mm.
which was awesome. So different experiences, a lot more, I guess, more independent feeling. Like you're kind of running your own show versus being part of a bigger team. So that gave me a lot of insight into building teams. And, sometimes there isn't a process already in place. You've got to do it for yourself. You've got to figure out what you need to do next versus a more established process driven agency or client group as an example. So I learned a lot doing that.
Because you were in a satellite office, did they give you a lot of rope to build something for
Yeah.
yourself there? So you guys had a lot of leeway with what you could and couldn't do.
Oh, certainly. Yeah. And it was a pretty big team, more known for creative, I'd say at the time, versus media. So we worked on a lot of amazing projects, a lot of amazing clients. One of them being, I remember Fido was one of our clients. We did an amazing campaign called Fido Sessions. That was a combination of creative and media ideas and innovation. So a lot of flexibility, a lot of opportunity.
Did you make the jump to Publicis or Starcom or MediaVest before or after Boss had been acquired by Dentsu?
It was just before. So we knew something was happening. I just remember that feeling of, okay, I think it's time for me to look for something. That's what I did. And I was looking to go back to a bigger company and establishment, basically.
So tell us what brought you there.
Yeah, well, obviously, so it's MediaVest at the time, which is now Spark Foundry, I guess. So, well, I knew people that worked there and everyone loved it. It was a very well established, a lot of good things happening in the marketplace, big opportunities. So I looked at it as, I needed to grow and I need to have more responsibility and management opportunities. So that's where I saw my growth trajectory to go over there. I think I entered as a manager, I believe, um, uh, on craft at the time at MediaVest.
Oh, and you got to play with all the brands, I imagine, there on Craft, or did they have it siloed?
Yeah, you know what? Originally, I worked only solely on craft cheese, so I was a cheese expert, which I
Oh,
actually
that is
loved.
wonderful. That is
Yeah,
tasty.
but you learn a lot. I think that also taught me, in hindsight, being a specialist in one area is an advantage. So I knew everything about cheese. I knew everything about all communication with cheese. It sounds like too much information, but think of all the money of all the different clients and competitors spending in that landscape. So it was a great experience for me.
And even if you go one step above CPG, I mean, that's another notch in your belt right there, alongside, like you mentioned, telco, because you were working with Fido previous to that. You
Mhm.
mentioned being able to manage people, like moving up and looking for more managerial opportunities. Something I like to ask everyone is that as you get out of the trenches and you're managing people and becoming more of a coach and less of a player, is that a bit of an adjustment for you? Because a lot of people like getting their hands dirty on media plans and they kind of have trouble letting go of that and letting other people do that as they move up.
Yes, you definitely have to shift your perception. I think it's a lot of it has to do with trusting your employees and your team and guiding versus being in the trenches and doing. I was always a doer, 100%. I would get stuff done. Like that was my MO. I'll take care of it. Don't you worry. We got this. It's going to be done. Now, when you move into more managerial roles, you have to provide the framework for the work to be done, but you're not necessarily the doer. So it's really having that trust in your team to make sure that it's getting done in the way that it should be getting done. But relinquishing control is difficult. So I think that a lot of people struggle with that.
And you also made the jump to account director and group account director while you were there.
Mhm.
How did your responsibilities change? Like we already got a taste of it that it becomes more managerial focused, but as you climb that ladder, what does your day-to-day look like?
I think the big shift as you move up that like corporate ladder at an agency like that is you have to learn how to both manage down and manage up. So there's a whole world above client, everyday client level facilitation of the business. So that you have to be accountable to the stakeholders at the agency. And corporately, there's a lot of levels within there that you have to navigate. So that's a whole new learning curve for a lot of junior managers, or even you get to an account director role. That's a very important part of your learning development is managing up and understanding how you're accountable. At a day-to-day level, you're accountable for so much stuff under the water. Now you have to think about everything beyond that. And especially at a global organization, it goes beyond even your immediate city or your immediate office. So it opens up a whole new world of responsibility for as you move up the ladder there beyond group account director, even VP.
Broadly speaking, just focusing on your time at Boss and then your time at Starcom, is it easier to get things done at a smaller agency? And I'm not picking on one agency over the other, but just looking at the different sizes of companies. And I hear this from people, and I can even reflect on my own experiences as well, is that if you're the type of person, like you said, that just wants to get shit done and
Mhm.
advance things, it seems to be easier to do in smaller companies versus bigger companies. Did you find that agency side between those two or not really?
I'd say that can be true. It just really depends on the organization and like some large multinationals are very flexible, very agile. Some aren't. So I don't, it just depends. But I think the more people and the more layers, the more complexity. That's just generally like a rule. But that doesn't necessarily mean that small is 100% quicker. So I think it really depends on the organization and where you're working.
Okay, so let's bring things full circle. The opportunity to join M&K Media, how did that come about?
So yeah, it's an interesting story. So I've been at Starcom, Media West Starcom for I think almost 8 years, so a long time. But in that time, I had my daughter. When I'm mat leave and came back, and after I came back after a little while, I decided I wanted more flexibility in terms of work-life balance. I think a lot of people go through that. It's very common. And I also wanted a bit more flexibility in that entrepreneurial spirit. So I contacted a headhunter to help me with that. And it wasn't like an immediate need. It was more of a future thought. And yeah, there was an opportunity at M&K that, came up and I decided to go for it. And that's really how it happened.
And that came in through the headhunter?
Yeah. Yeah. And it was an interesting experience because it wasn't actually, it was a new role. It wasn't fully developed yet. But it was something that, it just ended up clicking, which is interesting.
Talk to me about what the experience was like working with the headhunter, putting aside M&K Media. Like
Mhm.
when you were going through that process, how long did it take? Did you like were there certain points when you thought, maybe I shouldn't be going this route, maybe I should be doing it direct, or maybe this is not the way to go about achieving that next level in my career? Like just
Uh-huh.
talk to me about that process in general.
It wasn't immediate. It was a long journey. I'd say that what I tried to do with the headhunter is be really honest with what I was looking for. And just, and to be honest, I wasn't exactly sure what I was looking for. I was looking for a customized opportunity for myself, so I was kind of creating something that didn't really exist. But so yeah, it took time. I think that it depends on your situation, but in my situation, it didn't hurt absolutely to have a headhunter helping me. But that didn't mean that I still didn't network and do my own, research and contacting and applying for jobs. So um, I think it was a combination of everything together that really helped. But it was a long journey.
So the opportunity presents itself at M&K Media. What kind of discussions do you have? Because right now you're at a new level in your career. This isn't like, hey, we need a planner. You have planning experience. Let's do this. There's a lot more involved with taking on a leadership role. So what do the conversations look like? What does the interview process look like? Give us
Mhm.
some insight into that.
Well, in this specific instance, opportunities brought to me. And then I met with Julie, and quite honestly, it was like everything just clicked together. It made sense. And it sounds really cheesy, but um, were like kindred spirits. And the opportunity that I had in front of me was so unique and so interesting and valuable to me. I valued that. Also, it's a women-owned company. Entrepreneurial spirit, again, that, kind of got me excited again about that entrepreneurial spirit, driving my own boat, being in charge and being, creating my own path was very important. So, it all just came together.
And you started there as an account director before
Mhm.
making the jump to president. And so, what did the role as account director uh, entail when you started there?
It was very similar to what I was doing at Starcom in terms of account directing. So it was, day-to-day client relationship and driving the business. But I looked at it as it was a bit of an interview period. The plan was to succeed into that leadership role eventually. So it was placing myself in the agency with Julie and earning, that trust because, being a president of a small agency is a massive responsibility. And so the few years that I was account director, that was on the job training, I'd say, to move up to that next level, which I did.
So, if anyone listening to this wants to get in touch with you to learn more about M&K Media, what's the best way to get in contact?
I'd say LinkedIn. So I'm very active on LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out, make a connection. Happy to do that. Set up a chat.
You've also had a number of promotions at different companies you worked at, like internal promotions. So, if anyone listening to this is trying to go for that next role and they want to stay at the company they're currently at, what advice would you give them?
I think there's a lot you can do. First of all, it's advocating for yourself. So telling your leadership team and your boss your ambitions and what you're striving for, because if they don't understand what your goals are, it's hard to craft kind of your path and help support you. So that's a big thing. And then, it's a long-term daily grind, like committing to, to achieving that promotion. So I always say you have to be doing the job before you're promoted. You have to prove that you can do it before you receive that promotion. So it's over, getting past, this is what I do day to day. It's doing that extra mile, showing that you're ready. And I think a lot of it too is managing up. It's like you have to understand that your boss is busy, right? And it's telling them, hey, this is what I'm doing. This is what I did. This is my wins. This is what I learned. Um, that instills confidence that you are open, you're honest, and you're a hard worker. So I think all those things are really important.
Something else we can bring full circle in this conversation, Humber College.
Yeah.
The student is now the teacher. So you are a professor in the advertising media management program. Give us kind of the 101 or the skinny as to what the program is and the course that you're teaching there.
Yes. So it's within the business school at Humber College. It's called Advertising Media Management. And it's a pretty wide breadth of experience across advertising and media in terms of the curriculum. I teach specifically two courses. So one is media strategies and planning. That's probably my favorite one. It's teaching students how to write a media plan. Basically, that's the end goal. So that one's really fun. And the other one I teach is traditional costings, which sounds boring, but it's fundamental to your skill set as a media planner and buyer. So that's TV costing, radio costing, out of home, print, um, all that fun media math that, everyone doesn't like to do, but it is so critical to our job. So that one I love too. It's hard when it's an 8 a.m. class for that one because students don't like doing math that early in the morning.
Would you say that class is the equivalent to music theory?
It's similar, yeah, for sure. I would. That's a good parallel. It's just so critical. Like in our roles, I think that a lot of media planners and buyers gloss over that or use tools, to do it. Understanding the numbers is just a very critical piece of our job.
Yeah, that's an interesting point you bring up because there's a lot of talk about how AI is going to take away a lot of those mundane things. And even though I'm on board with all of that, like, great, save me as much time as you can, I'm kind of concerned that we're going to lose that craft. Like basic things like
Mhm.
writing an email or being able to analyze a media plan and understand why decisions are made. Those are going to go by the wayside. Kind of like long division. Like,
Yeah.
can you do long division still? Because at one point we were handed calculators and told that's what we had to do. At least that was my experience in school. Elementary school was long division. High school, it's like, why are you wasting your time? Grab your calculator. And now I can't do long division.
Yeah, I think that I totally agree with you. I love all of the aspects of AI. I don't want to lose that critical thought or feeling connected to what your work is. Like that's for me. I even get down to like taking out a piece of paper and doing the math myself versus using a calculator. I'm old school, but I just want to make sure that I understand, the math is working. So I think there's a role for all of these things and all of the technology. There still needs to be that double check and critical thought, right? Like
Yes.
if you submit something and you haven't thought about it at a deep level and you haven't double checked it, you haven't done your job. So it most likely is right. But, at the end of the day, you have to really dig in and understand it. So that's what I worry about is media planners and buyers just relying too much on the tools and not taking the time. So you're going to gain all this time back by all these advances of, quantity and, saving time. But you can't just eliminate that critical thinking piece because if you do that, you're just relying too much on the technology. So that's my perspective.
What do you learn from teaching that informs your day to day at M&K Media?
I learned a lot from teaching. Well, first of all, I learned how to teach because quite honestly, I've never taught before. I started teaching there. So that's a huge skill I'm developing over time. Uh, I learn from the students. So every class, I learned something new about media that I didn't know before because they use things that, they're first adopters. They, talk about what they're doing on a day to day basis. So that I learned a lot in the classroom from them. And I also learned I think the big reason why I started teaching is to help with public speaking
Mm.
because I, you know, I present all the time and, it's fine. But there's a difference between presenting in a boardroom and public speaking or presenting and teaching to a group of individuals or adults at a mass scale like this. Like sometimes I have up to 60 to 70 students. So getting your point across to a large group like that is very difficult. So I've really started to understand techniques of how to communicate in a more efficient and impactful way that I've been learning on the job, which has proved to be very valuable.
For me, the thing that I've had to change more than anything else is I've had to up my virtual presentation game since the pandemic. Like that was always my Achilles heel, but because I work sales side and the demand from upper management is always to have in-person meetings, it was something that I never really had to worry about. But then all of a sudden the pandemic hits and now I've got to do virtual calls. I had to up my game there. Did you find that you had to make that pivot too? Because your classes went completely virtual. And correct me if I'm wrong, I still think there's a virtual option so people could dial in even though you're in person. At least I've heard that from some of my other peers who also teach.
Yeah, so it's interesting because I started, I think it was 2021 when
Oh,
I
so you were
started.
post pandemic then, sort of.
So but it was still
In the pandemic,
virtual.
yes.
Yeah, so I started virtual, which was not good. Like I didn't know how to do it. And the interesting part was the students at the time rarely were on camera. So literally it would be 2.5 hours of me literally sitting here and talking to a black box of people that may or may not be there. It was kind of like the Twilight Zone for a while. Um, and then slowly in that year, I believe we started to do hybrid and then we went back to classroom. And that was even more difficult because it was still deep COVID. Like there was, distancing rules and all these things. So it was very complex. So the first 2 years was very difficult. But then once we got back to in classroom all the time, and these classes are mandated in classroom, so they have to be. Um, I liked it a lot more. So I feel way more comfortable in the classroom than I did virtually, um, which is, you know, learning those skills to present in person again after COVID was interesting, right? Because you kind of went backwards and, you know, you had all this experience prior to COVID being in the room, and then you worked for a few years and then you're back. So um, it was a journey, that's for sure.
Did you find that some of your students thought that this was going to be the status quo for their professional life as well too? Like they would just kind of roll up on a Zoom call in their pajamas and that's that. Did you find that you had to kind of let them know that there are a lot of benefits to going into the office, like that far
Yeah.
outweigh the commute that they're probably dreading?
Yes, indeed. I think that a lot of students don't have the experience of a corporate in-person environment just because of COVID, right? So a lot of them were in school, and now they're going to find jobs and they've never been in an office environment before. So my from my view, it's very important for them to experience that before they get to a role, so they understand how important it is and how different it is. So even just simple things like um, um, showing up on time, shaking hands, you know, eye contact, being present in the moment, not on your phone, you know, things like that, are important tools to teach them before they get to their, before they get to an interview. And I think too that on that note, interviews, a lot of them are still virtual, but I think a lot they should be in person because you need to experience that in-person connection and that interview with a person. Because when I was, you know, back in the day, in every interview was in person. So it's interesting.
Your contributions go beyond Humber College and M&K Media. You also volunteer with the Advertising Club of Toronto. So why is it important for you to also volunteer in your industry?
Well, yeah, I love volunteering. I think it's very important. I think in the industry, the reason why I volunteer for Ad Club specifically, and it's the Student Day Committee, is to support students to get into the advertising and media community. And I think Ad Club is a great opportunity for them to network with real life people while raising money. So it's a fundraising event too. Um, and quite honestly, a lot of my students volunteer at these events, and it's a way to get me for me to help them to get into a volunteer position. So I always encourage, you know, show up to these events, you know, volunteer to Digital Day, volunteer to Student Day, um, because you never know who you're going to meet. So I love it. Like I think that it's a great committee. I think Ad Club is amazing, and the people I've met through volunteering at Ad Club um, have been great allies of mine, honestly, throughout the years. So it's been very valuable for me.
Jill, this has been a great chat. Are you ready for rapid fire questions?
I think so. Yes.
All right. The campaign you're most proud of.
Well, there's so many. I think the one I was referencing before. Well, first of all, we work for a lot of not-for-profit clients, which I am very, very proud of. We have a few this year that we've been working on. One of our pro bono clients is Raising the Roof. So that's one that I'm the most proud of to really drive awareness of homelessness in Canada. So that's what I'm most proud of. The one I love in terms of execution and innovation, I think is that FIDO campaign I mentioned before, Sessions campaign. If you look it up or Google it, it was super innovative and creative, and I loved working on it.
Your favorite movie?
This one's hard. So if I'm talking about like all-time movies, I'd have to go with, it's gonna sound cheesy, but I love White Christmas. It's a movie I watched 2 or 3 times during the holiday season. I know every word, so I have to go with that one.
If Hollywood were to make a movie based on your life story, who would you want to play you?
This one's so hard. I have to go with Jennifer Lawrence because she's hilarious and smart. And I'd like to think of I'm both of those things.
Your favorite book?
Okay, so this I actually did some research on because I do read a lot. More like fluffy reading, you know, like not anything serious. However, looking back at my favorite books, I have two that I wanted to mention. So the first one is called, I have them here. It's called No Logo by Naomi Klein.
Oh, I've read that one. Yeah.
Have you? Yes.
Yeah.
So I read this in university, and it's a fantastic read about brands, and it's kind of anti-brands and talking about how brands have now become more of a lifestyle than the actual product. So there's a lot of interesting things in this book. And the other one I wanted to mention that I love is called A Heartbreaking Work of Staggering Genius. I don't know if you've met this one
No, I'm unfamiliar with that one.
or read this one. It's just an excellent book that won a lot of awards. So everyone should read that one.
Your favorite song?
Well, my favorite band is Radiohead because I don't know, just always has been. So I'm going to say Idiotech is my favorite song.
If I had to pick my favorite Radiohead song, it'd be Just. I love that one.
It's amazing.
It's a classic.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The best advice you have ever received?
I think it's in business, it's be yourself. You know, like you have so many attributes as your own individual person to bring to the table. It's just be yourself, and don't ever stop learning. I think that's a big one. Is you don't know what you don't know, honestly, and no one can know every single thing. So never stop learning.
If you could go back in time and give your younger self advice, what would you say?
I'd say, you know, just from a personal perspective, don't spend time with people who drag you down. That's like my biggest advice. And, you know, I say it to my daughter, like, spend time with people that prop you up because life's too short, you know? And I learned that later in life, I think, you know, with some friends, but you really want to spend time and be friends with people that have your back, no matter what.
My signature closing question: if you weren't in media, what would you be doing and why?
I think I'd have to say right now, from my view and in my stage of career, I have to say in an academic environment, I do really enjoy that feeling that you get in an academic environment, either teaching or in research. I think would be fascinating. I've always wanted to write a book. I don't know why. I don't know about what, but I'll figure it out one day.
Okay.
But I find it fascinating, just like continuing to learn and grow.
Well, when you write that book, you can come back on and promote it.
I'd love to.
All right. Jill, we're going to end things right here. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Victor.